Hello, I'm John. Welcome back. So I've got 4 books to share with you today, and this is maybe 5. And this is my quest to catch up. So um, in my last video, I said that I was going to do 4 books a video until I caught up. The trouble is, since I've made that video, I think I've read 3 books, 2 or 3, and so I'm eternally falling behind here. So I'm not sure how in-depth I'm going to be about these books. I'm already regretting wearing this jacket because now it's hot. I was cold, now I'm hot. But anyway, so we're just going to get right into this. So the first book I read, I was really, I've been excited about June on the Range this year because I have a lot of Westerns here that I want to get through. And I bought this one a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It's probably been a little bit longer than that. I don't think it was in my last book haul video, but it is Catlow by Louis L'Amour. I was just really drawn to that cover. Some of these covers of these old Louis L'Amour books are just spectacular. Westerns in general tend to have really good covers. This was $1. It was on clearance, so I just grabbed it. And um, I was I was a little bit disappointed by this one. Not completely. It was so some of Louis L'Amour's books can be really good, and some of them can be not very good. And this was somewhere in the middle. I think it had a really good idea, a really good premise. I just don't think it worked out very well. Um, so it's about I can't remember if he's some kind of ranger. I know he works out of Fort Smith, Arkansas, back in the Old West. His name is Ben Cowan. So maybe he's like a territorial ranger. I don't think he's a Texas ranger. So he is the law in these parts, and there is a man named Catlow, and he grew up with Catlow, and they're not really friends. They're awfully friendly to not be friends. They're described as having a lot of respect for each other, but I don't think the premise of them not being friends, even though they grew up together and they've wrestled each other and been in the same places, I don't really think that worked in this book. They were too friendly to just respect each other. And Catlow is like this charming rogue. He started out on the up and up. He was going around. So they have these massive cattle ranches, and some of the cows will wander off and they're not branded. And the ranchers were paying men like Catlow to go and round up these not exactly feral cattle, but round them up and add to the herd, and they would pay them a lot of money. And then they decided, wait a minute, we don't want to pay these people money. So they stopped paying them and turned them into outlaws overnight because they have all the money. So the first 50 pages of this are working up to how Catlow becomes an outlaw, but he's charming and everybody loves him, and the only people who hate him are the rich people. And so there's about 55 pages of that, of Catlow being arrested by Cowan, and then he just mysteriously vanishes from his jail overnight and that sort of thing. And Cowan will ride into his camp and have these buddy conversations with him and then say, oh, well, I'm going to arrest you, you know that. And it's my duty in all this. And Catlow's, oh yeah, you arrest me, that's fine. We'll just see how it goes. And several times over this book, Catlow allows himself to be arrested by Ben Cowan because he respects him and wants him to keep his job. So that's the first like 50 some odd pages. And then Ben Cowan gets wind that Catlow is going to go into Mexico, and there's like a whole shipment of gold. There's a bunch of gold that's left over from not the Mexican Revolution, because I think that was later, but there is a war, and someone had stashed all this gold. The Mexican army found it. Now they're going to move it. Catlow's going to steal it. And Ben Cowan wants to stop him because he thinks that Cowan is going to be killed. And it's really Cowan's duty to go down there and stop Catlow and arrest him because he's wanted in Texas. And those elements were just kind of a little bit goofy. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes Lamore's plots can be a little goofy. He leaned too much into the pal, buddy, chum kind of thing in this book, I think. Just a little too hard. Because Cowan's not a bad guy. He's not anyone to worry about. So, I don't know. That just didn't work for me. I mean, the tension there between them wasn't there at all, really. And Catlow's just on this whim to go down and steal this gold. And they get down there and all these adventures happen in Mexico. There is a man chasing Catlow because they got into some kind of weird spat at Catlow's girlfriend's house, which didn't really make sense. It was just the guy walks into the room and they automatically hate each other, and okay. And so then the guy vows, well, I'll get you, buddy. So he chases him all the way down to Mexico, which was kind of ridiculous because the guy was supposedly wanted for murder and he was supposed to be on the run from that. There's a lightning fast romance in this. There are some very violent scenes in this, though. Some of the gunfighting is really violent, and I didn't expect that because a lot of times Lamore's gunfights and violence tend to be pretty tame, but not in this book. So I don't think it would really be a spoiler to tell you that Catlow steals the gold because it's on the back cover, it's on the front page, and then they have to go through the desert. Catlow decides to take them through the desert, and they get attacked by a Native American tribe, Native Mexican tribe. I'm not really sure what the correct term there is. The indigenous peoples of the area. And they're pretty hostile, and they start attacking these guys. And one by one, they're getting picked off in the desert, and at the same time, Catlow is being chased by the daughter of one of his outlaw friends. Not really his friend, but an outlaw who kind of double-crossed him. And yeah, it was okay. I liked that. After the first 55 pages, it got pretty good. I didn't care for the lightning romance. I mean, Ben Cowan rescues a Mexican army officer. He goes to a dance. He talks to a lady while he's dancing with her. Then that is their entire romance. And of course, it works out in the end. It's a Louis L'Amour book. That wouldn't be a spoiler. That happens in almost every Louis L'Amour book. There is a lightning fast romance, and the hero almost always gets the girl. So, yeah, that is Catlow by Louis L'Amour, and it was okay. I liked elements of it. Some elements I didn't like. Probably said too much about it. If I did, I apologize. Let's see. So this book I read in an afternoon. It's really short. It looks longer than it is because there are a lot of notes, which I appreciated. I didn't read the notes, but I really appreciate when people put notes in the book. That is The Cheese and the Worms by Carlo Ginzburg, the cosmos of a 16th century miller. So this is about a man named Pinocchio. I think that's how his name was pronounced. I'm not entirely sure. Wasn't his name, actually. It was his nickname. But anyway, he was a miller. He was a carpenter. He was kind of a jack of all trades, really. And he was a heretic, according to the Catholic Church. And Ginzburg goes into why he was a heretic, like what his beliefs were. There's a lot of records about this guy, apparently. A lot of letters between the inquisitors. And he had some really out there beliefs for the 1500s, and Ginzburg is trying to figure out how is it that this miller in this small town in Italy came to have all these beliefs that he really shouldn't have had, because, he is a peasant, and we don't think of peasants as being literary, or we just kind of think of them as being sheep who took whatever they were told as the truth. And the main power in Italy at the time was the Catholic Church. So he had some interesting beliefs about, so something like Christ couldn't be God because Christ was a man, that in the beginning there was God and the chaos, and God didn't know anything about the chaos. He was insensate, and from this chaos came the angels, like the worms out of a cheese. In that day, they didn't know that, maggots and cheese didn't just erupt out of the ether. They thought that's what happened, that there was a cheese and the worms just appeared, and they didn't know about flies laying their eggs or anything like that. So right away, that's heretical, right? And he just had some really out there ideas. I didn't really memorize them or anything like that. I didn't really remember them. I'm not really religious at all. So um, it didn't strike me with a force. But what did strike me is that Minocchio was a man who didn't know when it was a good idea to keep his pie hole shut. So he is dragged up before the Inquisition for going around his small town telling everyone these beliefs that he has, that maybe he got out of books, maybe he got from people he knew, and maybe some of it he just got from his own mind, about all these heretical beliefs that directly contradicted the, teachings of the Catholic Church, the power of the day. And he went around town for about 10 years talking to people. And when the inquisitors asked him, well, why did you put up with this? I said, well, he's all right. We like him. He's just a little bit crazy. So they didn't take him seriously. And maybe sometimes people would say, all right, that's enough of that. I don't want to hear that. That's not good. And he would be very outspoken and very angry about these things, and talk to everybody, including the local priest, who was apparently the one who, after a decade of this, turned him in to the Inquisition. And he was hauled up before the inquisitors, and he still didn't shut up. He didn't, if he had just said, yeah, I said some stupid things, because they were actually trying to be lenient with him because everybody liked him. But he went up before these inquisitors and he told them exactly what he believed over and over and over. And he went really in depth with it, and they'd ask him questions and he'd answer their questions, and he just dug this deeper and deeper and deeper hole for himself. And he was surprised when they threw him in prison. So they threw him into a dungeon for the rest of his life. And after 2 years, he wrote to them and said, I'm really bad off. I've learned my lesson. I repent. I need to go home and help my family. So they send him home. And he's okay for a little while. They make him wear this special garment. I think they made him wear a hair shirt. And he couldn't keep his mouth shut even then. So he goes back to talking to everybody about these heretical beliefs. And after the leniency they showed him, initially, they could have burned him at the stake. And they let him out of prison. He goes back to talking about all this. They pick him up again, and he was burned at the stake for heresy. So really, if I took anything from this book, it was that you should never really go up against the power of the day with beliefs that you know that they are never going to agree with. You should have some kind of guiding inner thought of believe whatever you want, but know when to talk about it. Minocchio didn't know that, apparently. And he dug his own hole. He dug his own grave, It was interesting for that. I probably didn't follow it very well because I'm not very well versed in 15th or 16th century Italy and in the Inquisition and the beliefs of the Catholic Church. I really don't know a whole lot about that. I've tended to avoid that kind of thing as I've been reading over my life. But I thought it was pretty good. There are people who are much more knowledgeable about this book you can find reviews from than myself. but it was short, and it was an interesting look in the world of these peasants who we think of as being illiterate. Really, that doesn't seem to be the case. They seem to be passing all these books back and forth and having these discussions and secret beliefs that went against the agreed upon narrative of the day. So that was interesting. I have another book by Ginzburg called Ecstasies about witches. I was thinking about reading that one, but I picked this one up instead. The next book I read was Sailing Alone Around the World by Captain Joshua Slocum, and this really nice Dover edition. Dover used to make really neat books, and this was just really good. This is a true story about a captain of a ship. He retired, went on land. He didn't like it. He was bored. So somebody offered to give him a boat. And when he went down there, the boat wasn't completed. He had to fix it himself and reconstruct parts of it. It took 2 years. And I can't remember exactly. Somebody said something like, well, you'll never make it around the world or something like that. So Joshua Slocum said, yeah, whatever. I'm going to sail around the world. And he did. And this is just his really interesting account of that. So it's old-fashioned in all the ways you would expect it to be, being a book written in the late 1800s or the early 1900s. I think he left on this trip in 1895, and it took him a couple of years, I think maybe 3 years to go around the world. And I just really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. He was already a very experienced sailor. He had gone to several of these places, so he would show up and see his old friends and that sort of thing, at least in the Atlantic region. He went to Gibraltar. He went to, the southern tip of South America. He tried to go through the Mediterranean, and he was chased by pirates. And he decided, I don't want to do that. So he decided to cross the Atlantic and go around South America. And this is just an account of the people he met, the places he went. Now, like I said, it is from the late 1800s, and he does have some encounters with hostile natives, and he never goes out of his way to be racist or anything like that. He seems to really get along with the different peoples he meets, but if anyone tries to harm him, he takes it very personally. And I can't remember all the places that he went, but it was just really nice. He met Robert Louis Stevenson's widow. He met several of the governors of these islands and certain kings, and it was just a really interesting book. They would hear about his trip, and they'd come out to welcome him and all this, and it was just really neat. Unfortunately, later on, he tried to do it again, and he was lost at sea, from what I understand, but I really enjoyed this. There are really interesting accounts of his time at sea, of going through storms, of dealing with wildlife and fish and whales and stuff like that. I just really enjoyed it. It's really good if you're into that kind of thing. So this next book I read is called Stalking the Wild Asparagus by Euell Gibbons. And this is a guide to how to eat weeds and plants that grow out in the woods and things of that nature. Things that most people don't look at twice. This is from I want to say this one is from the late 50s. Let me see. Okay, it was copyright 1962, this edition from 1971. And there's some really interesting things in this book, some really interesting things that I had never thought of. He talks about eating knotweed, about eating, I think, milkweed, and he talks about making pancakes out of cattail pollen, and it was just really interesting. He actually just went out into the woods and tried all these things. And some of these things I've had persimmons, for instance, and things like that. But I've never ate a knotweed before. And let's see here. There are illustrations and his own accounts of finding these plants, of digging them up and eating all the different parts of them, or trying to the roots and stalks and stems and flowers. There's sassafras. And I just thought it was really interesting, and his observations are really interesting. And he feels like there's this whole food source that's just going to waste. And people make fun of him for eating all these plants. And he thinks that's really terrible because they're missing out. And I don't know if I would go out and follow any of his, like I said, some things aren't so bad. Pawpaws, persimmons, things of that nature. But I don't know if I would eat a knotweed. So something that he didn't really address, which I think is relevant and he probably should have addressed, is that if we were all doing this, if we were all going out into vacant lots and into the forest, we would pretty much consume all the resources pretty fast. I mean, he never goes into talking about like hunter-gatherers and how they were nomads, and they had to be, because if they stayed in one spot, they would eat up all the food. And I thought that was a little short-sighted on his part, but I don't think he ever believed that everybody was going to do it, so he didn't go into that. But I just thought it was nice. There's another one of these called Stalking the Blue-Eyed Clam. I have that one also. I think he wrote a couple more books. He unfortunately didn't live all that long after this edition of the book. It wasn't because of the foods he was eating. He had some kind of problem with his heart and he died. So that is Stalking the Wild Asparagus by Euell Gibbons. And let's see, I will put in one more book. It's not really a book, it's a novella. When I read it, or when I bought it, I didn't know that it was actually a collection of two novellas, and they only tell you that on this bottom line here. It doesn't say that up here at all or on the front. It's The Attraction by Douglas Clegg. And I didn't care for this very much. There were parts of it I enjoyed, but not so much. So the best way I can explain it is that it is a bad B movie from the 70s. Except we never really get a 70s flavor in it. And it's about 5 college kids who go on a road trip. So there is a cynical, intelligent, intellectual girl that this boy who has a scholarship to this elitist college. I say elitist because that's how Douglas Clegg describes it. It's all these rich kids and they're just there to party. And he is in love with her. He's kind of a nice guy, a Mr. Nice Guy. And she doesn't pay him any attention because he kind of fawns over her. And he says she wants to go visit her dad in California. So he has a car. He says, I'll do it. And she has an ex-boyfriend who is like this mega jock. And he is going out with this girl who is like the 70s tube top goddess, kind of described as being ditzy and that kind of thing, not very intelligent, all looks, no brains. And then there is like a stereotypical pothead character, and he's high all the time. And I don't know exactly, it never made sense to me, like, why would her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend be coming along on this trip? It was never explained, it was never talked about. Or like the pothead kid, like, why was he there? These things are never discussed. They just all pile into the car after this wild party night and drive to California. And on the way there, they get to the desert. I can't remember if it's in New Mexico or Arizona. Let's see, Arizona. They the jock is driving the car and he drives it off into a ditch. They have to get towed to this gas station, and at the gas station there is a roadside attraction, and it is supposedly a like a Mayan mummy or an Aztec mummy. It has these really long fingernails, and it's not really human looking. I think it's fake. And there's a big sign that says, like, don't feed him because he'll come back alive, and his job is to make sacrifices to the god. And they don't believe it. And the jock and the nice guy kid, they really are stereotypical, by the way. I'm not just describing this way because I forgot their names. Get in a fight in this room, and the jock pushes the kid. He falls down, and he gets scratched by the mummy. And then they're also being chased by Tube Top Girl's stalker, and he comes in at this moment. The guy who runs the gas station hears this commotion, runs in with his shotgun, and the jock grabs this mummy and runs out, and they get in the car and drive off, and they run out of gas in the desert. And the mummy comes to life and starts to kill them. And there are some really not very well thought out moments in this. Like, so while this mummy is killing them, the nice guy and the cynical girl wind up alone together, and she hasn't paid him any attention. She has talked bad about him this whole time. And she goes, oh, we're stuck in the car with this mummy, literally right outside, scratching on the car. This is the perfect time for us to hook up. What? I mean, it's literally right outside the car, dancing around. Like it can't bust out their window? I didn't understand that. And that made no sense. There were multiple things that just kind of seemed not very well thought out. The whole book seemed half-baked. Like, it felt like it needed not only an editor, but also it felt like a first draft. It felt like a first draft. And I feel like Douglas Clegg really didn't take enough time to think this book out, to write this book. It just seems like it was done on a whim, and maybe he was going for that 70s drive-in B-movie feel, but he just didn't clinch it, Yeah, so I've had that experience with Douglas Clegg where sometimes I really like his books, and I think they're really good, and they're always inventive. Not this one so much. This one, like I said, is more like a stereotypical B-movie kind of thing, and that's fine if it's done well. But this really wasn't done all that well. So anyway, that is The Attraction by Douglas Clegg. And I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.